All right, welcome everyone. Let me give it 30 more seconds, and then we'll get started. Hey, well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're tuning in from, and welcome to this last COSSA headlines webinar for 2025. It's hard to believe that we're here already. But we're happy you're here so that we can do a little bit of wrap up for the year that we all made it through, and to do a little bit of thinking about next year. And you will have the pleasure of hearing from Kenzie and Elise from our team later on to talk about some of the resources and activities we have ready for you now and or preparing for next year so that we can hit the ground running when this all starts back up again after the holidays. So season's greetings to everybody, and I'm really glad that you're here with us. So the plan for today is to not review everything that happened over the last year. I don't think we all want to relive that, but to highlight some of the major things that have happened specific to the research community, and acknowledge that there is a lot of unfinished business and a lot of topics, issues, challenges that will carry over into the foreseeable future. We want to, like I said, look ahead to what at least we can expect a little bit, what we know as of today for 2026, and then end with some resources that are at your disposal. Okay. Well, so we knew heading into this year that there would be a lot of change, but I don't think anyone could have anticipated how much change and how quickly we would see it. With the exception of the annual appropriations bills, all of these other items on the screen are really new challenges for the research community, and they all happened at once. And so if you hear your professional society or advocates that you work with that this is really an unprecedented environment, that is true. And these are all huge, huge issues as you've been experiencing, that could take up an entire year themselves, but we're dealing with them all at the same time. For example, agency reorganizations, those can take years and usually require legislation. But we're seeing so much happen over the course of this year related to reorganization, some challenges to that, some Congress actions, some not so much. And so that is a big departure, is how quickly there is sort of this refocusing of certain agencies. Even if the org charts aren't changing, the changing of the priorities and the activities. Making things even worse is the fact that Congress, which usually serves as a backstop when the administration goes too far, has all but capitulated to the president, and this is certainly true with the House. Oops, excuse me. It's true with the House, as I'm sure you understand from the reporting, all year long. And we're also seeing the use of media this past year to spread misinformation and mistrust in science. Now, of course, we saw that during the pandemic, but it's certainly something that not only is continuing to happen, but is happening by the White House, using the media to call into question science writ large and specific areas in particular. So we've been busy at COSSA reporting on and responding to the many presidential actions since day one of the Trump administration. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I think it's important to look back and see what all happened this year that feels like 10 years. So on day one, these are the executive actions taken by the president. They seem like distant memory at this point, but um, rescinding all of President Biden's scientific executive actions around scientific integrity and diversity and so forth. And remember back to Doge. Do we remember that? It's been a while since I've thought about Doge, and all of the DEI program cancellations and so forth. And the presidential actions continued at a good clip for a few more months as the administration started to take on other topics like health research, more government layoffs, and turning attention to the Department of Education. By the spring, executive orders did start to slow a bit as the research community, as universities, as the administration started to fight things out in court. But we're now starting to see some fine tuning of the administration's position on the U.S. science enterprise. And I'll give an example, but as time has gone on this year, the administration has been trying to find workarounds to implement its policies. And we see this specifically with the Improving Oversight and Federal Grant Making executive order from back in the summer, which we've reported on. But as a reminder, unlike the earlier executive orders that simply announced a new policy, regardless of whether they were legal or constitutional, these later executive orders are a lot more nuanced. And this is proving, just by reading some of the language in this executive order, that what they're trying to do is respond to the court challenges, this one specifically when it comes to the terminated grants, the thousands of those that have been, that the courts have ruled against and were told to be refunded or reinstated. This executive order is in direct response to that. So requiring future discretionary grants that they can be terminated for convenience. Right now, that language is not included in the terms and conditions of a research grant. And so this is a way to get around any lawsuit for a quote unquote wrongful termination of a grant. But each agency has also been directed to revise the terms and conditions for current grants as well. And so this is obviously something that we're going to watch, and we're all going to want to collectively watch in the future, and especially if you are lucky enough to get a federal grant in the next couple of years, really paying close attention to the terms and conditions and what it says in that, because this would be a pretty major change that would leave a lot open to political determination as opposed to peer review. Okay. If COSSA was in the business of determining a word of the year, like Oxford or others, I would choose the two phrases on the screen. No longer effectuates agency priorities and arbitrary and capricious. And these are related. We have learned collectively, I think, as a country, a lot of new terms. The public has learned a lot of wonky terms that are not normally in their daily lexicon, just given all of the chaos and the turmoil. No longer effectuates agency priorities is the language written in law or in regulation that the administration is using to terminate grants, programs, and to reallocate resources. And so it is language that gives that right to the administration. The backstop there is with the courts. And what the courts are trying to decide is this activity, is this action taken because it no longer effectuates agency priorities, is that action arbitrary and capricious? And so these are sort of going against each other, right? You have the administration saying, we have the legal authority to do these things because it's not in our priorities anymore. And the courts have to decide, is that going too far? Is that actually true? And of course, there's so much more that happened this year. And most of these topics, and this was just a list that I wrote down quickly just off the top of my head. Most of these will reemerge next year or are happening in real time or are longer term challenges like the brain drain, for example, and the STEM pipeline, things that we'll be addressing for quite a long time. All right, but a bright spot this year, if we can find one, is with respect to science funding. And it's proof that advocacy does work. So shown on the screen here is the status of funding for science agencies as it currently stands. So as I'm sure you know, the government is no longer shut down because we have a continuing resolution through the end of January, which means Congress is not going to do any more work on appropriations, at least publicly, until next year. But we are told that staff and committees are working behind the scenes to negotiate some differences. But my point with this slide is take a look at the president's request column and then look at the House and Senate comparisons. Now, as I said earlier, the House in many ways has capitulated to the president, giving him the big, beautiful bill, giving him the nominations that he's been asking for, and so on. But when it comes to federal science funding, both the House and Senate have rejected those proposals. We provided an in-depth analysis of the president's budget request back in the spring when that came out. But you can see on the screen here, let's look at the National Science Foundation. Yes, the House is proposing a significant cut, but it's nowhere near the decimation that the president's budget request included for NSF. That is a welcome signal of that there is still support for these agencies and that the community has really made their voices heard. The same thing with NIH. You can see the numbers there and with the Institute of Education Sciences. Now, we don't know, anything can happen when the final budget is finally enacted sometime next year. But the science advocacy community did its job this year, and that's reflected in these numbers. And not just this year, but COSSA, you, other advocates spend years nurturing these relationships so that we can have this exact type of outcome. So I think that's something that the community should be proud of because we have articulated to Congress that this is something worth taxpayer support. Just another word about funding real quick. So in addition to the numbers as an indicator of congressional support, Congress has heard us this year on other issues as well. So embedded within the NSF bills, we have language in the Senate bill protecting the social, behavioral, and economic science funding at NSF. We have the Senate bill rejecting the cuts in the reorganization for the STEM Education Directorate at NSF. And to varying degrees, both bills reject the administration's wholesale proposal to eliminate DEI and STEM education programs. The Senate rejects wholeheartedly. The House is sort of reinstates their favorite programs. When it comes to NIH, though, I think that's where you see the most coming together of both parties and House and Senate when it comes to the number, but also you might recall that there was a significant restructuring proposal earlier this year by the president, which looked like this, taking the existing institutes and centers and narrowing it and combining and eliminating until they get to 8. But both House and Senate, which both have Republican leadership, rejected that reorganization plan. They both rejected the administration's policy to to create a 15% indirect cost cap, flat rate, which also, as you know, if you've been following, has also been addressed through the courts. And so that indirect cost rate is not currently on the books, but it continues to be assumed in the president's materials. So talking about science priorities for next year or budgets for next year, they still assume that they're going to achieve a 15% indirect cost cap. But at least for now, Congress is sticking with the research community. And another example is the Senate bill has rejected NIH's plans to forward fund half of its grants going forward. There's a lot of info here, and you can go back and find a webinar on all of these topics at some point over the last 12 months, so I'm not going to rehash it. But my point here is that not all is lost, that to some degree, Congress can still be a backstop, but it really does require that we all speak up, that it's not just the lobbyists in Washington who make changes these days, but as we really saw throughout the year, through marches and town hall meetings and letter writing campaigns, making your thoughts and opinions known can make a difference. So it's important to say thank you when lawmakers act on your behalf. It seems silly, and sometimes you don't agree with your lawmaker on every other issue, but they supported an increased budget for NIH. You want to say thank you for that, because we hear from members of Congress themselves who say, I didn't act on this issue because I didn't hear about it. Or I supported this last year, but no one said, no, thank you, or no one acknowledged that this happened. They're not going to do it again. And so if we're going to advocate to them and be a loud voice, we need to thank them when they do act on our behalf. All right, enough of this year. I am over it. Let's look to 2026. So as I mentioned, funding is not completed, even though the fiscal year began on October 1st. With the continuing resolution that ended the government shutdown, it included a couple of appropriations bills. So a good chunk of the government is funded through the rest of the fiscal year. But the bills that we care about in the research community are still pending. And so come January 30th, will we have another government shutdown? Will we have a year-long continuing resolution, as we saw with this year's funding, fiscal year, or last year's funding, fiscal year 25, when in the spring, they couldn't come to agreement and they just decided to carry on existing funding for the rest of the year. That is a very likely outcome for this, for the 26 bills as well. Just given that the dynamics that were in play last spring during the 2025 funding debates are still there. There is still infighting among the parties. There's still the smallest of margins between the Democrats and the Republicans, and still fundamental differences between the House and Senate on how the federal government should be spending its money. Nothing has changed. So to think we'll get a very different outcome, given that the context has remained the same over the last year, it's just not going to happen. So we'll have to see. My money would be on a year-long continuing resolution, but there may be a short government shutdown too as they work through that. We also know that there is going to be more to come from the administration related to research. There are a couple of new executive actions that have come out in the last couple of weeks. One is this Genesis Mission Executive Order, which more has to do with the Department of Energy and high-tech stuff, but it's very science-focused, and actually very, I think, our colleagues in the other science disciplines are supportive of this effort. So that's something to watch going forward, because it's going to be major investments in certain science and tech areas. But another one that just came out before Thanksgiving is a new request for information on accelerating the American scientific enterprise. And so through this RFI, there are 13 questions that stakeholders are asked to address that are intended to inform the creation or the formation of executive branch efforts to advance US leadership in science. And so the questions are things like, what funding mechanisms could improve public-private partnerships? How can we, and what are the mechanisms to support new or additional high-risk, high-reward research? And even goes into identifying whether there are any unnecessary or burdensome regulations that should rise to the top of the list. So, this is still an indicator that things are happening with respect to science in the White House. The Office of Science and Technology Policy is quite active. And so they are moving along. It's really important, though, that the community respond to things like RFIs. You might think in this environment that responding, providing comments to a potential regulation maybe is not worth your time, or you don't agree with the president's position, so you're not going to weigh in. But it's really important to have your thoughts on the record. These things are public. The responses are public, and it's something that you can point to later on as well. So I do encourage anyone interested to share their thoughts through RFIs. We also know the administration's science priorities for next year because they released them in a memo a couple of weeks ago, usually in the summer, but it was late this year. Every year, the White House, OMB, and OSTP put out a joint memo to federal science agencies, telling them what the priorities are for next year. And this is meant to inform the budget request process. So as you agencies are drafting your budget requests, know that these are the things the White House cares about. And it's everything that you would expect: AI, quantum computing, energy independence and dominance, high tech transfer, really a huge emphasis on applied research. Not social and behavioral science, but also not social and behavioral science, right? We're not necessarily singled out, but we are also not included as a priority. So that's something we need to continue thinking about in terms of strategy going forward.
Really quick, Wendy, there's a question in the chat that I thought you could go ahead and touch upon from Carolyn. It says, do you have any intel or speculation on what NSF's recent archiving of all SBE DDRIs, dissertation grants, means for the future? Is this a pause or indication of changed priorities? What are your thoughts?
I can't say I have an answer to that one right now. We'll definitely ask around because that is troubling. And as you can see on the screen, there is a vacuum in science leadership across the federal government. So we are worried. We're worried about not just dissertation grants and but other areas of research that aren't explicitly named in the president's priorities. And because there's so much chaos, some of these activities could go away without too many people noticing. And so that's really, really a concern. So I don't have any news on that yet, but hopefully we will shortly. But looking to next year, like I said, there are a lot of unfilled science leadership seats in the federal government, not just NSF, since the director abruptly resigned back in the spring. But at NIH, almost half of the institutes and centers don't have leadership right now. About 11 institutes and centers, a couple of them on the screen: child health, nursing, minority health, and health disparities. They don't have. They're actively recruiting right now. Some of those previous leaders have been fired. Some of them quit on their own. But it's not a great situation there. And then we have acting leaders at so many agencies, including many that we care about: Census, IES, Justice, and Justice Statistics. Really concerning about the lack of leadership there. And we also know next year is an election year for Congress. And it shouldn't be a surprise, it happens every other year. But I think the stakes are extremely high this time. Not only will the election determine the balance of power in the House and in the Senate, election years also mean that there's less working days in Washington. And because the entire House is up for reelection and 1/3 of the Senate, members are trying to avoid tough votes. This means that grassroots advocacy is even more important during a congressional election year. And that's because, at least for House Republicans, they are caught in a really tough situation right now when it comes to reelection. On the one hand, they need to listen to and act on the interests of their constituents. That's why they have this job in the first place. But at the same time, they're afraid of losing the president's support. And the president may be endorsing their primary opponent, for example. And so the more uncomfortable the community can make these folks who are running for reelection, so that they are struggling to address the needs of their community versus worries of losing the president's support. That is the most important job in terms of grassroots advocacy in an election year. So that can take many forms, and we'll talk a little bit more when we talk about some resources. But the reason grassroots engagement will continue to be the most important strategy for our community next year. We said that this year, and that's going to continue, whether it's marches or rallies or town halls. For the foreseeable future, the voice belongs to the people, and that's who policymakers are going to listen to. So what can you do? Well, at the beginning of the year, when we were all scrambling to make sense of everything, I shared this slide of things that you can do. And heading into 2026, we continue to recommend these actions. I'm going to say a quick word about two of them, but if you want to hear our thoughts on the others, we have covered these in past webinars as well. But I want to continue to say a word about staying calm and learning what's real. This is really about staying informed, finding sources that you trust, that are fact-based and impartial, and that allow you to formulate your own positions. This seems obvious, and to a science community, obviously we want to we want objective sources, and we want to check that we can trust where we're getting our information. But that is easier said than done sometimes, especially with social media. And we encourage you to get to know your congressional delegations. You don't have to have a meeting necessarily, but subscribe to their newsletters, follow them on social media. These are very simple, passive things that you can do, but you can start learning about their priorities and ways that you might be able to engage with them on behalf of the research agenda. A couple of the sources that we trust are on the screen: the Federal Register, of course, COGR, which we had join us in June or July in our webinar, and they cover all of these topics: indirect costs and research security, and that's their job. And so they are a treasure trove of information. FYI, Science Policy News is also an incredible newsletter, as is the Federal News Network, which is written by feds for feds, but it's open to the public. And it really goes into the details of what's happening at federal agencies, how the reductions in force might be impacting, or other things that are really affecting the federal workforce. And of course, Elise will talk about the COSSA Washington update, but that is also a good trusted news source. I wanted to just quickly mention a new resource that we have that hopefully you've seen by now, but we recognize, given this year of everyone learning new wonky government terms, it's not always well understood what they mean but especially what they mean for social and behavioral science. So we created COSSA 101, our crash course on the federal government, which is just easy explainers of some of these terms that we in Washington take for granted. We know in our sleep at this point, but articulating why we follow this on behalf of the community. Why should you care about it? So far we have primers on government shutdowns and appropriations. We have more in the works related to executive orders and continuing resolutions. So I encourage you to check that out on our website as another way to stay informed. And I wanted to end my part just by leading into a discussion we'll have next about ways that you can take action and what you already have at your disposal. You may not know. So this is a picture of our Take Action page on our website. We link to it all the time, so hopefully it looks familiar. But there you'll find a whole menu of options for ways that you can engage in the advocacy process, recognizing that advocacy is not one size fits all. Maybe you only have time to shoot off a quick email to your members of Congress. We have action alerts that help you do that. Maybe you have time to come to Washington and participate in Social Science Advocacy Day. We have that option for you. Maybe you want to do something at home in your home district, attend a town hall meeting. We've prepared a guide to help you do that. So know that these resources exist, they're public, they're free, and we encourage you to use them and share them as you wish. So now the depressing part is over. I'm going to pivot to Kenzie, who will talk a little bit more about Social Science Advocacy Day, and then Elise will finish up with some more resources for you. So please stick around for that.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you recognize me. If you don't, my name is Kenzie, and I'm the Government Relations Associate with COSSA. I've been at COSSA for a couple years now, and I have attended 3 advocacy days. This will be my 4th this year, or I guess in the upcoming year. So I'm very excited to talk to you guys about it just a little bit, just to give you a primer on what it's going to be like, and why you should attend. So this year, we will be having Advocacy Day on March 23rd and 24th, so it's a 2-day event. There's a couple things just on the slideshow that you can read through, but one thing that I really want to focus on is that historically, about 2/3 of our attendees are first-timers. So if you haven't ever gone to Advocacy Day, or if you don't have a lot of experience being an advocate, don't worry about that, because we are going to teach you everything that you could possibly need to know before the day comes around. Next slide. Okay, so what are the goals of Advocacy Day? So Advocacy Day is a 2-day event where we spend 1 day training advocates and the second day going to congressional meetings with several different offices. And so one thing that I always like to really emphasize in these meetings is that advocacy and going to meet with your congressional offices is a two-way street. We really want Congress to know how important social and behavioral science research is and how important it is to fund it so that you can do your research or your colleagues can do their research. But on the flip side of that as well, we want them to know that you exist and that there are experts in these fields that they can use when creating policy. And so when we go to these meetings, not only are we advocating for funding, but we're also advocating for you and your research and making sure that they know that you exist. And kind of what that looks like is just you going in, telling your story, talking about your research. And so I always like to reiterate that is the one thing that we really need advocates to focus on, is just telling their story. And one thing that I remember hearing from a past webinar that Wendy gave is that Congress is just like us. A lot of the members, a lot of the staff, when they have a question, they go and they Google it and they try to find the answer that way. So instead of doing that, we want to offer them experts in these fields and make sure that their policy is evidence-based. Next slide. So Advocacy Day, what can you expect? One of the big things that as I mentioned, you don't need to know everything there is to know about funding, appropriations, policy, any of that. You really just need to come in and tell your story, talk about your research. And so the first day, we teach you everything there is to know. We teach you how to communicate with policymakers, tell your story. We usually do a storytelling training as well, where you can really learn how to best get your message across. Um, and honestly, it's a really fun day as well because you get to meet a lot of social and behavioral scientists that are all over the country. They come from everywhere. We try to hit as many states as we can. And it's just a really great way to learn a lot of different skills that you can then take on to other areas of your career as well. Um, so it's a really great day and I really enjoy it. And I know Carolyn put in the chat that she really enjoyed it as well. Our advocates really enjoy it. There's a couple pictures on the screen that you can see all smiling faces. Next slide, please. All right, so before Advocacy Day, you actually have a lot of resources at your fingertips. Wendy mentioned a couple of these in her slides, and Elise is going to go a little bit more in depth on them as well. But we really try to make it as seamless and easy as possible to advocate leading up to Advocacy Day and also during Advocacy Day. So with that being said, we want to make sure that whatever barriers you may have to, any barriers that you might feel as if are preventing you from going to Advocacy Day, we want to ease those burdens as much as we can and make sure that you have every opportunity available to attend. To that end, we've created a couple different toolkits for you as well. So one of them is a guide to seeking institutional support. That guide is going to help you speak to whoever it is that you need to speak to, whether it's your dean, your organization, and just try and get funding in order to go to Advocacy Day. This is something that we developed in recent years, and so we would love to share it with you. So if you do want this guide, we can share it. Just email any of the team members. We are happy to send it to you. Another thing that we have also developed is a publicity toolkit. So if you, for some reason, can't attend or you can attend and you want other people in your member organization to attend as well, we have a toolkit that basically explains how to conduct this outreach, how to share it with your community, and everything that you possibly need to know. And so hopefully those two guides and toolkits will be helpful for you as you learn about Advocacy Day and hopefully attend. But we have other things too, like an advocacy handbook, the crash course series that Wendy mentioned. And we also have action alerts. And action alerts are a really important way of conducting advocacy and getting to know your congressional members in a very easy way. In less than a minute, you can send an email to your congressperson on a lot of different topics, including funding requests, calls to protect key agencies, even urging members to reject proposals that maybe go against social and behavioral science research or would be damaging to research. And on Advocacy Day specifically as well, we launch a action alert campaign. And during that campaign, if you're unable to attend Advocacy Day, you can use action alerts to still have your voice be heard, even from wherever you are. If you're at home, if you're at work, it is really less than a minute. It's very easy and it just drives the message home, especially as we're on the Hill, already giving our message to Congress in person. It just kind of doubles the effect. And then I've also linked the Action Center because that's where a lot of this information can be found. If you have any questions, feel free again to email any of us. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of materials that you get before Advocacy Day, but also on Advocacy Day, there are quite a few materials that you're going to get. I want to reiterate, you don't have to be an expert, most important part, but also we don't want you to feel as if you have to come to Advocacy Day and memorize everything that we tell you and then go to these meetings and have just an overwhelming amount of information. So with that being said, we give you a million different things, but I want to kind of explain them in two separate parts. So you get two folders, one of which is for you and one is for the congressional member and their staff. And so these two folders are going to help you throughout the day as you go through and meet with your congressional members. Some of these things include like an interactive program workbook for you. We also have funding requests, policy issues, etc., that we include in a folder that is called a Leave Behind folder. And we give those to Congress and their staff so that you don't have to remember everything, like all of the asks for all the different agencies. You don't have to remember all of the policy issues. These are things that we can leave behind and they can read after the meeting. That way you can really focus on your story, your research, and we don't have to worry about memorizing every little thing. Um, and you will also have all of this information before Advocacy Day if you decide to prep. It's available in a Google Drive as well. Next slide, please. All right. And so as an advocate, you will be sorted into a team of different advocates as well. So you won't be attending Advocacy Day by yourself. You'll be with other members of your community, most likely either from your state or your district. They will also have their own stories, their own research to talk about. And so you guys will hopefully, become friends, get to know each other, have a really great time. But it also kind of eases the burden if you're feeling a little bit nervous because you're not doing it alone. And then on top of that, you will also be with a seasoned government relations professional like me or someone else from DC. We also usually invite institutional like partners, for example, federal offices like at your university. We'll invite them to see if they want to come along as well. So they also will be very helpful in that situation. But most importantly, I just want to underscore you wouldn't be attending these alone. And you wouldn't have to know everything there is about policy and funding because someone else will have that information and will be an expert in it. So you, again, really just have to tell your story. And that's exactly what we need right now. As Wendy mentioned, advocacy right now is so incredibly important. Grassroots advocacy, making sure Congress is aware that not only is research incredibly important, but it has a face and they live in their district and it's very important for their community. And so that's really what Advocacy Day is all about. And yeah, next slide. Yes, we do have great buttons. If you're interested in participating, one of the things that I want to mention is that you do have to be a member of one of our member organizations. If you are attending this webinar, though, you are most likely already there. You're probably a part of some member organization. If you're not sure, we do have a list on the COSSA website that you can go look at. But please register. We have a QR code on the screen. You can take a picture, however you want to do it. It's also on our website. We currently have an early bird discount, but we also sometimes will have free registrations. So please email us if there is some reason that's preventing you from getting funding or whatever it is. We'd be more than happy to work with you on that and try to get you to come. Like I said, we just want advocates to come in and talk about their research. And so we're happy to help in any way that we possibly can to get you here. And if you do have another barrier that we didn't touch upon during this webinar, maybe something that, we wouldn't think of as DC government relations people, please email us as well because we're happy to offer any support that we can, especially if it's something that, is something we can easily fix or even if it's just something we can talk through with you and try to figure out together. So we're always more than happy to chat with you one-on-one, and we'll also have some informational webinars up and coming too to talk more about Advocacy Day. So if you have any questions, my email is on the screen, but I'll also put it in the chat for you guys here too. And yeah, that's all that I have. Elise, you are next. I'll pass it to you.
Amazing. Thanks, Kenzie. Well done. So real quick, I will just very quickly introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Elise. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for COSSA. So today I'm just going to briefly go over some of our key communications resources that you might not know about and how you can also get involved with them. Before I start, I do want to very quickly, Kenzie had touched on action alerts, and I do feel like it is very important for me to emphasize the fact that when we say action alerts, you can send them very quickly. They take a couple clicks. They're so easy to send. So in the future, when you get an email from us or you see one of our action alerts kind of floating around, just know that we truly mean it. It takes 2 seconds to send. So that's just the first thing I wanted to start with. You can go to the next slide. Some quick resources. We will start with Why Social Science, for those of you that don't know. It's our monthly blog. So this is an initiative from COSSA that aims to share relatable and accessible information about the social and behavioral sciences with the public. So for people that don't know anything already. So each post, it kind of highlights the benefits and the contributions of research, and it encourages the use in tackling challenges of national importance. So over the last year, we've made it a priority for us to highlight a different discipline. And we've made an effort to show the work that an organization or an individual does to promote why it's significant. And in the next year, we're going to be focusing on having more posts from some non-SBS folks. So stick around and check that out. The next resource is our member messages. Hopefully everybody in here is already signed up because these are for members only, hence how you got into this webinar. But if you're not, you can use the QR code on the site or on these slides to sign up for them. And if you have any problems, you can always let me know. These member messages are ways to reach you with timely updates about a policy, any sort of key development, sending you our analyses, our action alerts, as I mentioned, and exclusive members only event invitations as well, or even information about an urgent RFI. There's all kinds of information that we send through these member messages. So strongly recommend that you make sure you are signed up and sending it along to anybody else you think might benefit from them. Our next resource is, we've teased this already, we've kind of touched on it, but it's our COSSA 101 series. And it provides a quick overview of kind of exactly what we've mentioned. It's a crash course in the federal government. It's easy to understand information about the inner workings of the federal government and how they affect the social and behavioral sciences. Again, we started with the first brief, which is what is a government shutdown, which came out appropriately during the government shutdown. And we've also included what is appropriations, and we're going to be including many more. One thing that I will mention is if you go to the COSSA 101 page, our crash course page, you will notice that we have our email there. And so we're taking recommendations. If there's anything in your mind, or you've had a member reach out to you, be like, I don't even understand what's happening here. Is there any sort of 101 primer? Let us know. We're taking tons of, we're open to whatever. So we'd love to hear from you about what might be most beneficial, but we're aiming on continuing to keep these timely. Our next resource is, of course, the Washington Update, which I think probably everybody on this call is already registered for or signed up for. But this is our biweekly newsletter, and it brings everyone, even non-members, coverage of executive branch news, congressional news. It highlights our member organizations, science community news, and much more, especially what's new from COSSA too. And over the course of the year, we've implemented a couple key highlights in our Washington Update, which include our Act Now section, where it sits at the top of our newsletter and tells you exactly how you can personally get involved. There's resources, there's action alerts, there's options to share your story, things like that. So we're planning on continuing that in the new year. And there's also a list for executive orders. I believe Kenzie already put the link in the chat, but we are keeping a running list of key executive orders as well. So making sure that those are front and center in case you missed any. So moving on to the next slide. This is also our social media. We're all over the place. We would love if you could follow us and engage with us. So these are our key ones. Next slide. So looking forward to 2016, oh my God, can you imagine? 2026, and how you can also help out. After going through all of this information, after the year we've had, there are little actions, there are big actions that you can do, and it's important that you know that they all matter. We'll take any help we can get, I think, these days. So something easy, the first thing you can do is just follow us on our platforms and sign up for our newsletter. Engage with us. We're always happy to engage with you as well. And we all win, when we're helping your platform grow and you're helping ours grow as well. Spreading the word about COSSA is also a key thing, whether it's sharing our resources, attending our events. And I think a really important note to make is that you don't forget about us. If you're in a meeting or if you're in a conversation, and you think someone might benefit from COSA, or you think bringing us up in any sort of conversation would be useful, I think it's important that you do talk about us, spread the word. We're always happy to hear our name ringing throughout any conversation. Donations, we recently changed our status, which kind of allows us to accept donations. Times are really tough, and we appreciate any help we can get. There's a QR code here to take you directly to our donations page. And the last thing I'll say is use us. We just went through a lot of resources that you can use. You're looking at the complete and total COSA staff, the three of us, and we're standing by to help with whatever you need. You're not a burden. Please contact us. We help with everything from Wendy is happy to pop into a webinar and chat about anything. We're here to help if you need a specific resource to fit some form of a project, or even myself, if you are looking for COSA in a newsletter. I'm happy to write copy. Anything you need, please let us know. Use us. And I think the final slide for at least my section is getting in touch. So my email is here. You can join COSA there. One of the resources as well is also our headlines webinar. It felt kind of silly for me to talk about that towards the start of my little spiel, since this is a headlines webinar, but we have a event page for our headlines webinars, and we'll continue to post those. We've had a really great year with these, and I think we'll probably continue the same format. So we're looking forward to having more timely discussions in 2026. But please reach out and let us know how we can help. And that is the end of my spiel. I think I will hand it back to you, Wendy.
Thank you both so much. I know that and thanks to all of you for sticking in there. We threw so much information at you, but that's really what we wanted to accomplish this year. We wanted to say goodbye to the year that we had, or at least see you later to a lot of it, but then to get us all excited about the work that we can do together next year. I got an email recently from someone, a member, who said, "Oh, I just love COSA's resources, specifically this one, and this one. Are we allowed to share these with our members, with our own members?" And so COSA is one of the world's best kept secrets, even though we don't want to be a secret. Everything we produce, our guides, our handbooks, our newsletter, you can forward as is. Share them, print them off, post them to your own website. That is the entire reason we exist. So please, as everyone has said, please use us as much as you can or as you want. Happy to answer any questions. Let's see what's in the chat. Is this Carolyn, is this from my part? Yes, okay. I'll scroll back a little bit. There we go. Federal News Network. Kenzie, do you have any insight into the Census Bureau?
I don't know off the top of my head why it was reduced. I do know that the presidential budget request was pretty high for the census. And one of the reasons for that was relating to like citizenship questions and other things that were a little bit uncertain on our end, and we weren't entirely sure what their plans were. But we can definitely look into that. And we do have our policy analyses on our website, and we did look over the Senate proposal the first time around. The new one, I believe, hasn't come out yet, the negotiation between the two chambers. But I do know that the census is one of those weird ones where there was a request to increase the funding, but the reason behind that request was a little bit uncertain. There was some interesting report language as well. And the Senate usually is more likely to do moderate increases or stay more level, while the House and the presidential budget request is usually a little bit more, trying to think of a good word to explain it, but usually a bit more unpredictable in what they'll do. So that would be my answer. Sorry, it's not more informative, but we do have an analysis that you can go and read that goes a little bit more into the census for the Senate as well as the House and the presidential budget request as well.
Yeah. I think that's a really good example of all of the information that we've been hit with this year, and at least my inability to retain it all in my head. So we will continue to refer you to some of our past resources as well. I have to go back and remind myself constantly of things that have happened. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I don't want to keep you, but I do want you to engage with us next year. Come back and come back ready to hit the ground running, because we have our work cut out, but we're excited to work with all of you. So wishing all of you the happiest of holidays and season's greetings, and stay warm and get some rest, because we'll be back in 2026. Thank you all.